As gardeners, we have to find a way of getting rid of plastic out of our garden. But to make a start, we have to reduce, reuse, and recycle what we have already. And then perhaps we could think about finishing with it. It's difficult to escape plastic in the garden. It's everywhere these days. But they did manage before. They used terracotta, and that made pots, urns, tubs, even statues in some cases. But its main difficulty was it was brittle and broke quite easily. And it was difficult to clean. And when you were working in bulk numbers, you had to literally force the plants out of the pots. So when in the mid 1950s the plastic pot arrived upon the scene, it was seen as being a complete revolution, probably as much as the computer is to modern society. The beauty of it was smooth, it was light, it was clean, and it was easy to use, and you could stack more in one space. Tradition meant that the plastic pots were a terracotta colour, but it wasn't until the nursery trade began to take up plastic in a big way and purely and simply as a utility colour, they used the black form. And these pots are the ones that highlighted the fact that they can't be recycled because the electric eyes that or sensors at recycling centres don't pick them up. And this is the reason why we begin to see coloured pots appearing everywhere. And these will be picked up by the sensors, but you'll have to check with your own authority whether they do recycle flower pots or not before you begin to send them away. There are plant-based alternatives appearing in the market now, and these are all held together in a natural gum. The ones we're looking at are mainly corn husks, and you can see they look exactly the same as the traditional flower pot. They're every bit as strong. They last a couple of years or more. They can be broken, but if you drop them, they tend to bounce if they're empty. And when you finish with them, you can throw them on a compost heap or just dig them into the garden. On the left, you can see a lighter pot, and that's the miscanthus or sugarcane fibre. The one on the right is the corn husk that we've just been looking at. And I used to take the miscanthus one round me, giving talks, and just showing people the alternative to plastics they could use, demonstrating it was every bit as strong, looked the same, and it lasted a few years. And then someone came up one day and gave it a squeeze and cracked it. And I have to say that, I was upset, but it goes to show it's no different to a plastic pot. There are other forms as well you can get now, and they're using pressed paper, there's fibre, there's tarred paper, peat, and here you can see one which has got slits in the side. Now, some of them don't have any drainage at all in them, and I quite like these when our local garden centre uses them. What you must remember is when you plant these, is just to peel the top down so that it's not sticking out of the ground, acting as a wick, taking the moisture away. And now we move on to growing trays, seed trays. I put seed in growing because they're two different depths. As you can see here, the lettuce is in a slightly deeper growing tray, and the presser, and you can see in front of it, is a shallower seed tray. The reason being that you just want to get things up as quickly as possible. Here we see plastic seed trays. The one on the right, the light green one, breaks down in sunlight and reduces itself to dust. The one on the left obviously lasts and needs cleaning. You could consider using foil as an alternative. I have done, but the thing you have to be aware of is on hot days it gets quite hot, and on cold days it'll be cold. So you need to insulate the pots in some ways. This is a resin tray, and I have to say, if it was made of terracotta, I could never afford it. And this is one of the things that have made plastics popular. I'm now switching to buying in any additives to the garden in a cardboard box rather than bring plastic into the garden. The same thing with liquid fertilizers. I don't buy liquid fertilizers because they come in plastic bottles. Even something as simple as a ball of string can come wrapped in plastic. So I've bought this one because it's simply got a cardboard band round the middle, and that's all you need. Hold the string together. Another area of high plastic use in the garden is growing media, and whether you're organic or not, there's no escaping the fact that we all end up with empty bags that will eventually find their way to the local recycling centre, and that really isn't an ideal solution to the problem. On the other hand, you could think about making your own compost. These are coir blocks that you can buy, and there are other available, such as bark and recycled wood chips. We now move on to labelling, and this is a lovely old lead label, but when you think about it, it's not very environmentally friendly. Plastic labels, on the other hand, they become brittle and snap and break up, and they're difficult to write on. And traditionally, wood was always used, and here you can see an assortment of wood labels from various things. And what do you write with? Well, straightforward, just use a pencil. This one's HB, but I've seen 6B recommended. One area where I think plastic perhaps is justified is irrigation and water equipment. Hose pipes and watering cans obviously rust, don't corrode. I mean, when you think you had to haul one of these watering machines around the garden, and the thing's even got cast iron wheels. I mean, it's heavy enough empty, let alone full of 30 gallons of water. And when it comes to watering cans themselves, I mean, if you don't keep them full of water all the time, eventually they will rust and leak, and you have to get rid of them. So perhaps plastic is justified there. We now move on to the sensitive issue of pest control. And these are some genetically modified pigeons seen a few years ago. And I must have wasted days, if not weeks, of my life trying to control pigeons. And I've still not found a proper answer. But not all birds are enemies. There's lots of friends, beneficiaries in the garden. This is a thrush. And you have to be careful when you're using this light, flimsy plastic net, because it can get their feet caught up in it and it can cause them injury, perhaps even leading to death. I prefer to use galvanized wire like this, just made from old bamboo canes that I cut down to form frames, and you can use them in all sorts of ways. So I find it a more satisfactory solution. Now come to the use of glassing in the garden, and there's no doubt about it. It is dangerous. If it gets broken, it remains in the glass. It never deteriorates. There's always a risk of a cut or an injury to you. And these are chase band cloches that have been around for years and years. And basically, it's a wire framework that holds together sheets of glass, as you can see. But when they get cold, or as they age, they become very brittle. And once again, it's a danger to the gardener. Here we're looking at peat screens, and they're made from old roofing timber that we had left over and sheets of visqueen that were put together. And the purpose is to stop peach leaf curl by protecting the plants during the winter time. This is one positive way of using all of those annoying plastic bags that we've got hanging around from trips to the supermarket. And it's known as a waspinator. It's designed to look like a wasp nest to deter wasps moving into other territories. And all it is an empty bag that's stuffed full of the old plastic bags that we've got. It looks like a football in the end. Let's just finish with a reduce, reuse and recycle message. Diolch, and thank you for watching. Goodbye for now, but if you would like to see any more, please hit the subscribe and like buttons.